Regardless of whether you love or hate the Nintendo Switch's catalog or retro games on the online service for $20 a year, it's almost a guarantee that at least half of the fanbase is gonna start rioting once they get bored with the NES and Super Nintendo games. And once that inevitably happens, Nintendo's gonna have to start rolling new console libraries out, which would logically be the Game Boy 64 and GameCube in that order. But you know what, I've already made videos on which 20 games from those libraries to bring over to the Switch, and even though you might think that's a pretty good deal for $20 a year, the fact is that it'll still only be a matter of time before fans want even more and start pantsing Nintendo employees in public as a sign of protest. And since the Wii Remote and Nunchuck are a hell of a lot different than the Joy-Cons, bringing that library to the Switch is going to be a lot more complicated than copy and pasting. So if Nintendo wants to avoid the risk of its employees being humiliated in public, then it might be a good idea to get some help from their old rivals at Sega and offering Dreamcast titles as a part of the catalog. You might think Genesis games would make more sense, and they probably do given how much easier those games would be to emulate, but we did just get the Genesis Mini and Classic compilations, so it's gonna be a little while before those titles are gonna be strong enough to diffuse riots, so jumping straight to the Dreamcast really is the only option. And look, I know this is never gonna happen, because it'd be way more profitable for Sega to just remaster and sell old Dreamcast games themselves as opposed to letting Nintendo bundle them in a subscription service. But honestly, I kinda just thought this video would be fun to make, and should hell ever freeze over, then Nintendo and Sega are gonna need a guy like me to figure out which 20 games to kick the service off with, rather than just pick the 20 best Dreamcast games. Because Lord knows there's already like 800 videos out there for that, and I'm pretty sure none of them took copyrights or royalties for an online service into consideration. So sit back in your family YouTube viewing bench, call Life Alert if you're a senior citizen because apparently you need it, press the subscribe button if you haven't already, and allow me, New Zealand's last remaining used car salesman, Cameron all one word, to tell you the 20 best Dreamcast games to kick things off with if they were to ever to come to the Switch's online service, which they won't. Numbers 1 and 2. Sonic Adventures 1 and 2. Well, we might as well go ahead and get the two most obvious ones out of the way first, I suppose. There's really not a whole lot I could say about these games other than mention the fact that they both had updated versions since the Dreamcast, so you could honestly argue that we should probably get those on the eShop instead. But then again, the Genesis Mini didn't include one of the versions of Sonic the Hedgehog where you could spin dash. And besides, you can't have a Sega retro library without including Sonic, except for the Saturn, I guess, since it never had a proper Sonic game. Despite the fact that there's better versions of these games, though, it's not like they're a million times better or anything like that, so it's really not a big deal. Plus, a big draw to playing classic games in the first place is to appreciate the history behind them, and that includes all the flaws. And at the end of the day, the first two Sonic Adventure games are just plain fun, even if they don't hold up as well as other games on this list. Number 3. Crazy Taxi. When this game first came out, I was never able to actually play it because the machine at the arcade was always so crowded, and I wasn't about to wait in line for an hour just to look like an idiot in front of everybody. So thankfully, when it came to the Sega Dreamcast, though, I was finally able to get my dirty-ass hands on it. In case you've never played this game, the concept's pretty simple. You're a taxi driver trying to bring people to their destination within a time limit while making as much money as possible, which would be absolutely perfect for playing with friends via the online feature, even if it is a little bit laggy. I mean, it'd be better if you could play with anybody like you could on Xbox Live, but meh, I'll take what I can get here. Unfortunately, this game would probably be a pain in the ass to put on the Switch's online service since Sega thought it'd be a good idea to use licensed music like Green Day at the time. But even if people complain about the missing tracks, I'd still love to see this game in the spotlight again. And yeah, I know there's two Crazy Taxi games, but remember, this video is about the best Dreamcast games to start with. And much like Earthbound Beginnings and Donkey Kong Country, Nintendo and, in this case, Sega, are probably gonna need to save some goodies for later. Number 4. Virtua Fighter 3. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and warn you right now. This is the first of many fighting games on this list, and to be honest, it's probably the worst in the bunch, too. But you know what? The Dreamcast was full of great fighting games, and even though I don't think it's the best one on the console, I wouldn't be surprised if there's others who did. And even if it's not, Virtua Fighter 3 still stands out enough to provide some variety at the very least. Number 5. Space Channel 5. This rhythm-based game's probably not everyone's cup of tea, but like I just said, variety's key, and it doesn't hurt to have a little character either, which this game's certainly loaded with. The basic gist is that it's 500 years in the future, and you play as Ulala, who's a reporter for a TV station that's tanking in the ratings. So to stay on the air, she decides to have dance-offs against evil alien invaders. I don't have a whole lot of experience with this game, but that's all the more reason for Sega to throw it on the Switch in some form or fashion. Number 6. Rez. This was the very next game made by the Space Channel 5 team, and it's pretty much what you'd get if you combined Panzer Dragoon with DDR. Not that it's a rhythm game or anything like that, but your attacks always sync up with the music and create additional layers to the sound, which I think's pretty neat, especially for a game from 2001, and thanks to the stylized graphics that didn't go for realism, the visuals hold up great as well. Number 7. Jet Grind Radio. To sum this game up, it's pretty much Tony Hawk's Pro Skater combined with Crazy Taxi, where you're in a rollerblading gang trying to tag the city while battling rival gangs and avoiding the fuzz. The graphics were amazing, the Tony Hawk engine was used wonderfully, and the replayability's through the roof, so if Sega's watching this video, and let's be honest, we all know they are, then they'd better add this game to the Switch, because I'm not going to do anything about it at all if they don't. Number 8. Dynamite Cop. Do you like Die Hard? No? Well, you should, because not only is the first movie an absolute classic, but the arcade game was pretty cool too, and Dynamite Cop's a sequel to that very arcade game. There's really not a whole lot to say about this, since most beat-em-ups are pretty self-explanatory, but even though this isn't the most popular game in the genre, I've always kind of thought it was a little bit underrated, and if nothing else, it'd be great to play online with a friend if you have any, which I don't, so I guess I just won't be playing this one. Dang it. Number 9. Toy Commander. Do you like the divine secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood? Yes? Well, great, because you may or may not like Toy Commander, which has absolutely zero to do with that movie. This is a game about a kid who gets army-themed toys for Christmas, and once he starts neglecting his old favorites, they all rebel against him and try to destroy the new ones. It's pretty much a rip-off of Toy Story, but seeing as how the developers had the audacity to name the kid Andy, it would appear that they're not trying to fool anyone at least. As for the actual gameplay, though, it pretty much revolves around controlling army vehicles, and to be honest, it is pretty fun, but it's kind of run-of-the-mill. But you know what, for a 20-year-old game, I think it holds up well enough. Number 10. Skies of Arcadia. Because what kind of video game collection doesn't have a good old JRPG? To be honest, I've never actually played these games even though I own the Dreamcast and GameCube versions, but if I was able to play it on the Dookie chair, then I'd definitely find the time for it. All I know is that most people say great things about this game, so I'm gonna go ahead and take their word for it. Number 11. Virtua Tennis. This may not be the greatest tennis game of all time. In fact, I doubt very many people would even play it compared to the other games in this video, let alone all the other games you could play on the Switch as it is. But in case you weren't aware, it's actually a law that Nintendo has to add obscure tennis games that no one really wants for each console in their online catalog. Nobody really knows why such a law exists, but should Nintendo violate it, then Reggie Fils-Aimé is going to be required to let the chief judge practice his French kissing techniques on him. Which wouldn't really be that big of a deal, but Reggie told me he doesn't want to do it, so I guess we're just going to have to deal with the tennis game. Oh well, maybe somebody somewhere will play it for like a minute or something. Number 12. Power Stone. Alright, so now's the point where we're going to talk about games that Sega didn't publish themselves, and even though I kept it to 5 in the previous videos based on Nintendo's own patterns with the NES and Super Nintendo, the fact is that there's just way too many great third-party games on the Dreamcast to narrow it down to just 5. And you know what? Power Stone's probably the Dreamcast game that I played the most as a kid, and even though I never really got good at it, I was definitely hooked. Unlike most other fighting games, Power Stone sets you and your opponent in a 3D arena with plenty of weapons to use, and if you collect all 3 Power Stones, then you transform into a badass for a little bit. The second game's better in every conceivable way, but again, if you included both, then everyone would neglect the original and not fully appreciate all the improvements. So I think it'd be best if the sequel waited a little while, because the original Power Stone's still a lot of fun. Number 13. Cannon Spike. This is a multi-directional shooter with characters from the Capcom roster, and sadly, I had no idea it even existed until long after the fact. Like much of the Dreamcast library, it was originally released in arcades and it got a port that didn't have to make a whole lot of sacrifices. Aside from the Capcom roster, this game's honestly nothing special, but it's expensive as hell on eBay, so if not on the Switch's online service, then Capcom needs to re-release this game somewhere else. I know it was actually developed by the now-defunct Psycho Games, but if Capcom can't re-release it, then I say we find the old CEO to Psycho Games and give him a piece of our ass. Now let's see, who do we need to talk to get this deal done? Wait, what? Shinsuke Nakamura of Kyoto, Japan? Well damn, alright. Number 14. Street Fighter III: The Third Strike. I know the Street Fighter Anniversary Collection's already being sold on the Switch, which features every superior arcade version of this game, but you know what, Crystalis is also in the SNK compilation, and Nintendo said friggin' and added it to the NES library anyway. And besides, while the Dreamcast port's not 100% as good as the arcade, it's still a damn good version in its own right. And there's probably a lot of nostalgia involved for a lot of people who might have wanted this version as an option for the Anniversary Collection, so adding it here would actually be pretty cool in my opinion. And if you forget about the Anniversary Collection for like 2 seconds, then Street Fighter III is still a lot of fun. Number 15. Capcom vs. SNK Millennium Fight 2000. That's right, another fighting game, but unlike Street Fighter III, this game hasn't been released since 2002, and I think that's a real shame. But since Capcom and SNK are buds with Nintendo, I don't see why this couldn't make the cut, because online multiplayer for a buried classic would certainly make the Switch's online service more appealing. Number 16. MDK2. This is a straightforward third-person run-and-gun with 3 different characters that offer different gameplay styles, with some puzzles and platforming thrown in for good measure. There have been a few remakes of this game over the years, but if you ask me, I think that just shows that the original did something right. Number 17. Fatal Fury: Mark of the Wolves. We've already got Street Fighter III and Capcom vs. SNK, so yeah, this probably is overkill, but you know what, if Capcom gets their own fighting game, then I think it's fair that SNK gets one too, since they're sharing a third together. Number 18. Soul Calibur. Okay, so if we've already got the best 2D fighting games on the Dreamcast that aren't co-owned by Marvel, then we really ought to include the 2 best 3D fighters as well. What's the other 3D fighter I'm talking about? Number 19. Dead or Alive 2. Alright, so I know there's probably way too many fighting games on this list, but if I excluded any of them, then I'd probably have gotten roasted up and down in the comments, which I'm sure is gonna happen anyway. But you know what, the gyro controls inside the Joy-Cons can't be used for light gun games, and there's no microphone or keyboard accessory for the Switch, so most of what I'm left with are fighting games that all happen to be among the best ever created. But if you still think this list needs more variety, then just keep in mind that adjusting your age in Dead or Alive 2 results in the chick's cans jiggling more, which provides a little extra something to the catalog, if you know what I mean. Number 20. Resident Evil Code Veronica. I'm pretty sure Nintendo's never gonna add M-rated games to the online service, but this video's already far-fetched enough as it is, so I might as well just go ahead and completely jump the shark by including the most underrated Resident Evil game of all time. People don't seem to appreciate this game just because it doesn't have a number in the title, but for all intents and purposes, this is the true Resident Evil 3 rather than the spin-off-y game that took the number. Which was a great game, by the way, but it definitely wasn't as good as Code Veronica. Apparently, Sony bullied Capcom into giving them the numbered title, even though Code Veronica was the game that pushed the series forward and truly felt like a sequel. Assloads of people still played the game anyway, and it's already been re-released like 8 times since, but above all else, it's just plain fun, scary, and it holds up better than the previous games in the series, and it definitely adds a lot of variety to the list. But anyway, that's my list. I know there's a lot of games that I missed, which is saying a lot for a console that was only around for about 2 years, but if you think there's anything important, then let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, I'll try my goddamnedest to respond to everybody. But let me tell you, if there's 2 Dreamcast games who need to be included in the Nintendo Switch's online service, then it would definitely be today's patrons of the day, Epic Gamer Noob and John Brennick. If you want to be badasses like these two, then consider supporting FU Game Crew on Patreon for loot boxes in the mail and other wacky rewards. And if you want to make a cameo, then send pictures or videos of you rocking any FU Game Crew merch like these legendary human beings you see before you. As always, like and share this video anywhere on the internet to help this channel grow. And if you want to prove that you're not down with registered sex offenders, then go ahead and press the subscribe button if you haven't already. My name's Cameron, all one word, and I'll be back with more videos soon.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.